In October of 2015, 22-year-old Marcus Chen vanished without a trace in the Great Smoky Mountains of North Carolina. For 7.5 years, he was presumed dead lost to the wilderness, perhaps fallen into a hidden crevasse or swept away by autumn floods. But in March of 2023, he walked into a public library in Sevierville, Tennessee, alive but broken. What he told investigators when he could finally speak shattered every assumption about his disappearance. Where he'd been for those 2,738 days, and what he'd been forced to build, revealed a conspiracy so methodical, so deeply buried, that it had been hiding 40 feet beneath the surface all along. This is the story of the Appalachian silence. Marcus Chen was everything a graduate advisor could hope for. Born in Portland, Oregon, he'd fallen in love with geology during a high school field trip to Mount St. Helens. The raw power of the earth, the way stone could tell stories spanning millions of years, captivated him in a way nothing else had. By age 22, he was pursuing his master's degree at North Carolina State University, specializing in karst topography, the study of landscapes formed by the dissolution of soluble rocks, creating caves, sinkholes, and underground rivers. His thesis focused on unmapped cave systems in the Great Smoky Mountains, work that required weeks of solo fieldwork in some of the most remote areas of the Appalachian wilderness. Marcus was meticulous, cautious, experienced. His faculty advisor, Dr. Linda Hartwell, would later tell investigators that he was the last student she'd ever worry about. Marcus planned everything to the minute. He carried backup equipment, filed detailed itineraries, and never took unnecessary risks. He was the kind of researcher who checked his gear 3 times before leaving campus. At 6:47 a.m. on October 15, 2015, security cameras at the university parking garage captured Marcus loading his white Ford Transit research van. The vehicle was distinctive, covered in university decals, and equipped with ground-penetrating radar equipment worth over $40,000. He'd filed his fieldwork plan with the department, as required. He would be surveying a remote section of the Cataloochee Valley, an area known for unexplored cave entrances and limestone formations that suggested extensive underground networks. His planned return was October 18th, 3 days later. At 9:23 a.m., a Park Service camera at the Cataloochee entrance gate recorded his van passing through. Marcus was alone, visible through the windshield, wearing his signature red North Face jacket. He waved at the ranger on duty, a casual gesture that would be replayed hundreds of times in the investigation to come. It was the last confirmed sighting of Marcus Chen alive. When Marcus didn't return by October 19th, Dr. Hartwell immediately contacted authorities. This wasn't like him. Even a flat tire would have prompted a call or text. Park rangers located his van at the Palmer Creek trailhead that same evening. It was locked. Nothing appeared disturbed. His camping equipment, GPS unit, and laptop were inside, secured in the cargo area exactly as protocol dictated. His phone was there too, powered off, battery at 67%. This was wrong. Profoundly wrong. Marcus never went into the field without his GPS and phone. It was his ironclad rule, one he'd emphasized to Dr. Hartwell repeatedly. The equipment wasn't just expensive, it was his lifeline in case of emergency. The next morning, October 20th, a full search operation launched. 65 personnel deployed across the mountainous terrain, park rangers, search and rescue teams, cadaver dogs, and a helicopter equipped with thermal imaging. They searched a 12-square-mile area, following every trail, stream bed, and known cave entrance. The weather was turning. October in the Smokies meant cold nights, the first hints of winter frost. If Marcus was injured somewhere, time was critical. On day 3 of the search, they found something. A volunteer searcher named Thomas Greer discovered Marcus's field notebook wedged between rocks in Palmer Creek, approximately 3.2 miles downstream from the trailhead. The green waterproof notebook was damaged. The cover was torn, multiple pages ripped out entirely, others rendered illegible by water damage and exposure. What remained was haunting. The last legible entry, dated October 15th at 2:17 p.m., read, "Promising formation at coordinates 35.6742, 83-89. Possible entrance obscured by rhododendron. Will investigate tomorrow after setting base camp. Hearing some kind of machinery in the distance, probably logging operation, unusual for this area." Below that, Marcus had sketched a rough map showing the trail, the creek, and what appeared to be a geological formation. Then nothing. The coordinates led searchers to a steep ravine thick with undergrowth, but they found no cave entrance, no camping equipment, no sign Marcus had ever been there. The machinery he'd mentioned hearing was particularly puzzling. There were no logging operations permitted in that section of the park, and no construction projects anywhere nearby. The investigation consumed weeks. Every possibility was explored with the thoroughness that missing persons cases demand. Wildlife attack? It seemed unlikely. There was no blood, no torn clothing, no signs of struggle. Black bears were common in the Smokies, but fatal attacks were vanishingly rare, and they always left evidence-torn fabric, blood, disturbed soil. Accidental fall? Possible, but the terrain Marcus had planned to explore was challenging rather than lethal. The Specimen Ridge area had steep sections, but nothing that would explain a complete disappearance. And where was his camping gear? Why would he leave his GPS and phone in the van? Voluntary disappearance? This theory gained no traction. Marcus's bank accounts remained untouched. No activity on his credit cards. No social media presence. No phone pings after that final cell tower hit at 1:34 p.m. on October 15th. His life in Raleigh was stable good grades, supportive family, close friends. He had no debt, no romantic turmoil, no motive to vanish into thin air. Foul play seemed most likely, but there were no suspects, no witnesses, no forensic evidence whatsoever. The trailhead had no surveillance cameras beyond the park entrance miles away. Cell tower data showed Marcus's phone last pinged near Palmer Creek, then went offline. One piece of evidence troubled investigators more than anything else, those torn pages from his notebook. The ripping was deliberate, forceful. Someone had removed specific information, specific entries that Marcus had recorded. But who and why? What had Marcus seen or documented that was worth destroying? By January 2016, the official search ended. Resources were exhausted. The case file listed Marcus Chen as a probable fatality due to misadventure or foul play. The Great Smoky Mountains had swallowed him whole, as they had dozens of hikers before him over the decades. His parents, David and Susan Chen, held a memorial service in Portland that April. There was no body to bury, just photographs, memories, and the unbearable weight of not knowing. Susan kept Marcus's bedroom exactly as he'd left it, his geology textbooks still stacked on the desk, his hiking boots by the door. David threw himself into work, unable to process the loss. Dr. Hartwell kept Marcus's office at the university for 2 full years, before finally boxing up his research. His notes on karst formations and underground water systems. His dreams of mapping previously undiscovered cave networks. The white Ford Transit van was returned to the university fleet after forensic teams finished with it, finding nothing that could explain his disappearance. 7.5 years passed. The world moved on. Marcus Chen became a statistic, another name in the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System database. But in the darkness, 40 feet below the Tennessee soil, Marcus Chen remained alive, imprisoned, and slowly losing his mind to a carefully constructed lie. The Sevierville Public Library opened at 9 a.m. on March 14, 2023, as it did every Tuesday morning. Located on Bruce Street, it was a modest brick building serving a town of 17,000, famous mainly for being the gateway to Dollywood and the Smoky Mountain tourist corridor. Head librarian Patricia Monroe was shelving returns in the non-fiction section when she noticed a man standing motionless near the reference shelves. She would later describe him to police with a clarity that comes from genuine unease. He looked wrong, she said. Not homeless exactly, but like someone who'd been removed from society and was seeing it again for the first time with fresh, confused eyes. He was pale, beyond pale, almost gray, like he'd never seen sunlight, extremely thin, with the kind of gauntness that spoke of prolonged malnutrition. He was wearing clothes that were clean but didn't fit right, a gray sweatshirt that hung off his frame, jeans that were rolled at the ankles. He was just staring at the shelves, not reading titles, not selecting books, just staring as if the mere existence of books was something he needed to confirm. Patricia approached to offer assistance. She'd worked at the library for 12 years and had seen all kinds of people using the computers for job searches, students cramming for exams, elderly patrons seeking large print mysteries. But this man was different. As she got closer, she noticed his hands trembling. He was clutching something papers, handwritten pages covered in dense text and diagrams that looked technical, scientific. "Sir, can I help you find something?" she asked gently. He turned to look at her, and Patricia later told investigators that what struck her most was his eyes. They didn't focus correctly. They looked past her, through her, searching for something that wasn't there, some threat or presence only he could perceive. Is this real?" he whispered, his voice hoarse, unused. "The books. Are they real books? Can I touch them?" Before Patricia could respond, before she could process the strangeness of the question, the man's legs gave out. He collapsed, papers scattering across the carpet in a flutter of hand-drawn diagrams and calculations. His head struck the edge of a reading desk on the way down, and he lay there, motionless, as Patricia rushed to call 911. The ambulance arrived at West Regional Medical Center at 9:47 a.m. Emergency room physician Dr. Marcus Webb, ironically sharing the victim's first name, immediately noted several alarming signs that suggested this was no ordinary collapse. The patient exhibited severe muscle atrophy, consistent with prolonged immobility or confinement. His legs were particularly wasted, the muscles depleted in a way that suggested he hadn't walked regularly in years. Extreme vitamin D deficiency showed in his blood work levels, indicating years without sun exposure, the kind of deficiency usually seen in prisoners kept in solitary confinement or patients who'd been bedridden for extended periods. His teeth showed advanced decay and neglect. There were multiple geometric scars on his back and shoulders, not random injuries, but deliberate, patterned marks that looked almost ritualistic. His hands bore calluses inconsistent with outdoor survival. These were the hands of someone who'd done repetitive manual labor in confined spaces, not the weathered hands of someone living rough in the wilderness. But the patient's mental state was most concerning to the medical team. He oscillated between catatonia and panic, never seeming fully present in the moment. He repeatedly asked questions that made no sense. What year is it? What's the date? Is the program over? Did we survive? Is Director Kellerman here? He had no wallet, no ID, no phone. His clothing bore no tags or identifying marks, as if someone had deliberately removed anything that could trace back to a source. When nurses attempted to take his fingerprints, using the hospital's standard biometric scanner, a routine procedure required for unidentified patients, the system took several long moments to process. Then it produced a match that made the nurse step back from the screen, her expression changing from routine concentration to shock. She stepped into the hallway and immediately called security, then the police. The fingerprints belonged to Marcus David Chen, reported missing in North Carolina in October 2015, over 7 years prior. Status: presumed deceased. Detective Sarah Coburn of the Sevierville County Sheriff's Office arrived at the hospital at 11:20 a.m. A 16-year veteran specializing in missing persons cases, she'd seen her share of strange outcomes. People who'd chosen to disappear and start new lives. Amnesia victims who'd wandered for years. But nothing like this. She pulled up the missing persons report from 2015 on her laptop as she rode the elevator to the 3rd floor. The photos matched, allowing for weight loss and age. Same distinctive birthmark on his left forearm. An asymmetrical shape resembling the Big Dipper constellation. Same facial structure, though gaunt now, hollowed out by suffering. But this wasn't just a missing person who'd chosen to disappear and was now seeking help to return. This was someone who'd been taken, held, and subjected to conditions that had nearly destroyed him. Marcus was too disoriented for formal questioning that first day. He drifted in and out of lucidity, his mind unable to anchor itself to present reality. He kept repeating phrases that Detective Coburn carefully documented. I have to finish the calculations. They need the load-bearing analysis by Friday, or the ventilation won't work. The air filtration system isn't complete. We won't survive if it fails. Director Kellerman said the drill is scheduled for April. I have to be ready. I have to prove I'm useful. That last phrase, Director Kellerman, gave investigators their first concrete lead. A name. Someone Marcus believed was in authority. Someone who'd given him orders and assignments. Detective Coburn immediately began running searches on any Kellerman in the area, any connection to government agencies or survival operations. The handwritten pages Marcus had been carrying were carefully bagged as evidence and photographed. There were 47 pages total, filled with incredibly detailed technical content. Engineering diagrams for what appeared to be an underground structure, complete with measurements and material specifications. Calculations for ventilation systems showing cubic feet per minute of airflow, filter specifications, carbon dioxide scrubbing capacity, water storage calculations, power generation estimates using solar panels and battery banks, hand-drawn cross-sections showing depth measurements. 40 feet appeared repeatedly, always in Marcus's careful block lettering. Supply inventories listing months of food, medical supplies, water purification tablets, and ammunition. And most telling, a title page reading, Continuity of Government Site. 7B, Final Specifications Report. Dr. M. Chen, Lead Geological Consultant. At the top of the first page, stamped in faded blue ink. Classified, FEMA Directive. Detective Coburn immediately contacted the Federal Emergency Management Agency. Their response was unequivocal and swift. This was a fabrication. FEMA had no Site 7B, no continuity of government facilities designated with that classification system. They had no employee or consultant named Kellerman in any capacity. And those classification stamps had never been issued by any federal agency. The format was wrong. The font was wrong. Everything about it screamed homemade forgery. The pieces began to fall into place with sickening clarity. This wasn't a government operation. Marcus hadn't been recruited for some secret program. He'd been kidnapped and psychologically manipulated into believing he was serving his country, working on critical infrastructure for surviving a national catastrophe. Someone had kept him underground, forced him to use his geological expertise to design and refine their own personal bunker, and maintained the deception for over 7 years. Detective Coburn ran the name Kellerman through every database, available criminal records, property records, vehicle registrations, business licenses. In Sevier County records, she found them: Robert Eugene Kellerman, age 45, and Diane Patricia Kellerman, age 48. They were registered owners of 237 Oak Hollow Road, a 14-acre property in a rural area 15 miles southeast of Sevierville, purchased in March 2014. Property records showed something unusual that made Coburn's investigative instincts flare. In August 2015, 1 month before Marcus's disappearance, the Kellermans had filed permits for septic system expansion on their property. The permit paperwork listed dimensions that struck Coburn as excessive for any legitimate septic system excavation depth of 45 feet, far beyond the standard 6 to 10 feet required for septic tanks. The excavation volume was massive, suggesting something far larger than waste management. Tax records revealed that Robert Kellerman had run a concrete contracting business called Redoubt Construction, now defunct, which had operated from 2010 to 2016. He would have had the skills, equipment, and knowledge to construct an underground structure. Diane had been a registered nurse before leaving the profession in 2013 for reasons not specified in the records. No criminal records on either of them. No red flags in their history. On paper, they were invisible. Exactly the kind of people who could commit an extraordinary crime simply because no one would ever suspect them. But when Coburn pulled security footage from Marcus Chen's university lecture series from early 2015, publicly advertised events that had been recorded and archived, she found something that made her blood run cold. In footage from a March 2015 lecture titled Engineering in Karst Landscapes, Building in Cave Country, the camera occasionally panned across the audience during the question and answer session. There in the back row, partially obscured but visible when the camera swept past, sat a woman and man taking detailed notes. The woman was holding a small video camera, recording the presentation. When Coburn ran the image through facial recognition software, it returned an 84% match for Diane Kellerman and a 79% match for Robert Kellerman. They'd been there. They'd been hunting for an expert, someone with the specific knowledge they needed, and they'd found him in Marcus Chen. They'd attended his public lectures, studied his work, identified him as the perfect victim young, brilliant, with expertise in underground geology and structural engineering in challenging environments. Investigators obtained warrants for the Kellerman property and all associated records, financial, digital, everything. What they uncovered revealed years of meticulous planning and preparation. Financial records showed a pattern of large cash purchases starting in mid-2015, clearly designed to avoid creating an electronic trail. June 2015, a $38,000 cash purchase of concrete supplies from a supplier in Georgia, far from their home area. July 2015. Purchase of an industrial air filtration system, specifically advertised as bunker grade and designed for long-term underground habitation. August 2015. $12,000 in solar panels and battery banks from a survivalist supply company. September 2015. Purchase of heavy-duty soundproofing foam and acoustic panels from a specialty supplier that catered to recording studios and, tellingly, people building safe rooms or bunkers. Robert Kellerman's laptop, which investigators seized, showed years of activity on doomsday prepper forums under the username Redoubt Builder. Hundreds of saved articles on economic collapse scenarios, electromagnetic pulse attacks, pandemic preparedness, and government continuity of operations plans. He downloaded congressional reports on continuity of government, FEMA disaster response protocols, and civil defense literature from the Cold War era. And critically, he downloaded and saved a lecture video from March 2015. Marcus Chen's university presentation on building foundations in karst landscapes and managing groundwater in underground construction. The laptop's browser history showed Google Maps searches for North Carolina State University parking areas, Cataloochee Valley cave systems, and searches for geology graduate students in North Carolina. In September 2015, the Kellermans purchased a used gray Chevy Suburban with tinted windows from a private seller, paying cash. The vehicle was large enough to transport an incapacitated person and equipment. Cell tower data, obtained through warrant, placed this vehicle in the Cataloochee Valley area on October 15, 2015, between 1 and 3 p.m. Exactly when and where Marcus Chen had last been seen. The timeline was devastatingly clear now. The Kellermans had stalked Marcus for months, attended his lectures, studied his expertise, identified him as the perfect victim for their needs. They'd built most of their bunker in advance, but needed someone with geological expertise to perfect it, to ensure the ventilation would work, the structure was sound, that it could sustain life long term. They'd tracked him to his fieldwork location and abducted him from one of the most remote areas of the park, somewhere no one would witness, somewhere his disappearance could be attributed to the wilderness. At 5:47 a.m. on March 16, 2023, a tactical unit from the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation surrounded 237 Oak Hollow Road. Armored vehicles blocked both exits from the property. FBI agents, Sevier County deputies, and specialized rescue personnel took positions around the modest ranch-style house. Detective Coburn, wearing tactical gear, despite normally working in plain clothes, held a megaphone and announced, "Robert and Diane Kellerman, this is the Sevier County Sheriff's Office. Come out with your hands visible. The property is surrounded." For 3 long minutes, nothing happened. The house appeared abandoned, curtains drawn, no movement visible. Officers tensed, prepared for a standoff or potential violence. Then the front door opened slowly. Diane Kellerman emerged with her hands raised, dressed in camouflage cargo pants and a gray t-shirt. Her expression was strange, not fearful or surprised, but annoyed, like she'd been interrupted during an important task, and this was an inconvenience rather than the end of her freedom. "He's in the workshop," she said calmly, pointing toward a detached metal building about 50 yards from the main house. "He won't come out willingly. He's destroying the computer." Officers found Robert Kellerman inside the workshop, frantically attempting to destroy a laptop with a hammer. He was subdued without incident, though he shouted about protected operations and, "You don't understand what's coming." On the laptop screen, visible before he'd smashed it, Technicians later recovered fragments of a file labeled Contingency Protocols, if discovered. The property search began immediately. Officers walked the 14 acres methodically, looking for any sign of the underground structure Marcus had described in his hospital ramblings, any indication of where he'd been held for over 7 years. They found it in the most mundane location imaginable beneath the septic system. What appeared at first glance to be a standard septic tank lid was, upon closer inspection, something far more sophisticated. The concrete lid was reinforced with steel plating hidden beneath a thin layer of normal concrete. Hydraulic hinges were concealed beneath a false layer that made it appear to be a simple, removable lid. When engineers used cutting tools to access the locking mechanism, they discovered it. A hatch leading to a vertical concrete shaft descending into darkness. The hatch was secured with an electronic lock disguised as a standard septic access cover. Specialized rescue personnel, wearing breathing apparatus and equipped with cameras, prepared to descend into an unknown space that might be structurally unsound, might have bad air, might contain any number of hazards. 40 feet down, the shaft opened into a constructed chamber that shocked even veteran investigators who'd seen the worst humanity had to offer. The underground structure was a work of horrifying craftsmanship, every detail revealing Robert Kellerman's concrete contracting expertise. The space was approximately 30 feet long by 20 feet wide, with 9-foot ceilings, roughly the size of a small apartment, but buried beneath tons of soil and rock. The walls were poured concrete, 12 inches thick, reinforced with rebar, in a grid pattern that any structural engineer would recognize as serious, professional work. The floor was smooth and graded for drainage, sloping gently toward a collection point. The ceiling supported the immense weight above through carefully calculated load-bearing design, exactly the kind of calculations Marcus had been forced to perform. The systems installed in the bunker revealed the depth of planning and the reason Marcus's expertise had been essential. An industrial-grade air filtration system drew air through concealed vents that opened at ground level, camouflaged as landscaping features. The air passed through HEPA filters and carbon layers, removing particulates and odors. Solar panels on the property fed battery banks that powered LED lighting strips and the ventilation system. A 500-gallon water storage tank, manually filled from the house above, provided water through a simple pump system. A chemical toilet system, like those on boats, handled waste. Every system was designed for long-term survival, for outlasting whatever catastrophe the Kellermans believed was inevitable. But the space wasn't designed for comfort. It was a prison disguised as a survival shelter. One corner of the bunker, approximately 8 by 10 feet, had been designated as Marcus's living quarters. This is where he'd spent 2,738 days of his life. A thin foam mattress lay directly on the concrete floor, with no frame, no bedding beyond a single wool blanket. A metal desk was bolted to the wall, covered in papers and engineering manuals, with titles like Underground Construction Methods and Advanced HVAC Design. Bookshelves lined one wall, filled with survival guides, engineering textbooks, and religious literature about enduring trials and tribulations. A small refrigerator, the kind found in college dorm rooms, contained minimal supplies, protein bars, canned vegetables, water bottles. A kerosene heater sat in the corner, vented through a pipe to prevent carbon monoxide poisoning. They'd needed him alive, functional, capable of working. On the wall, screwed into the concrete with metal brackets, was a printed sign in large 48-point font. Site 7B Regulations, by order of Director Kellerman. Below that, a numbered list that revealed the psychological control mechanism. All work assignments must be completed by 1800 hours daily. Complaints or questions will result in ration reduction. Physical fitness is mandatory, 30 minutes daily exercise required. Academic research continues until notification of surface clearance. Gratitude for inclusion in the continuity program will be expressed at morning briefing. It was a system designed to make Marcus believe he was part of something official, something he couldn't question, because it had the weight of government authority behind it. Make the victim believe they're serving their country, that their sacrifice has meaning, that they're part of a select group, chosen for survival. The larger portion of the bunker was Marcus's forced workspace, and it revealed the true purpose of his captivity. A full drafting table with architectural lamps, the kind used by professional engineers, dominated the space. Bookshelves were filled with technical manuals on structural design, geology, ventilation systems, water management, and underground construction techniques. Filing cabinets contained what would become crucial evidence. Hundreds of pages of calculations, diagrams, and reports in Marcus's handwriting, showing the evolution of the bunker's design over years. A whiteboard covered an entire wall, still bearing Marcus's handwriting. Load-bearing formulas, air circulation calculations, emergency protocol flowcharts. This is what the Kellermans had wanted. They'd kidnapped a brilliant geology graduate student and forced him to design and refine their doomsday bunker, to use his expertise to ensure their survival fantasy would function. They'd given him books, tools, and work assignments, not out of kindness, but utility. Marcus was their slave engineer. Forensic teams documented everything with meticulous care. Hair samples found in the drainage system confirmed Marcus had been there for years, and carbon dating of biological samples suggested continuous occupancy from late 2015 onward. Fingerprints throughout the space matched Marcus exclusively, aside from occasional prints from Robert and Diane near the hatch entrance, presumably from when they brought supplies or gave Marcus new assignments. Notebooks dating back to 2016 were found in a cardboard box, filled with Marcus's writing some technical, some personal diary entries that revealed his deteriorating mental state and his gradual journey from believing he was serving his country to realizing he was a prisoner. One diary entry, dated August 2017, demonstrated the psychological manipulation with heartbreaking clarity. Marcus had written, "Director Kellerman says the surface collapse was worse than expected. He showed me drone footage today. Empty highways, burned cities. I can't believe it. We're at war with Russia or China, or maybe both. How did I not hear about it before the program started? How did I not see the signs? The bunker saved us. I need to keep working. If the ventilation fails, we all die. Everyone who survived depends on this system working perfectly." The drone footage was fabricated. The Kellermans had shown Marcus edited disaster movie clips, news footage from hurricanes and wildfires taken out of context, anything that could be presented as evidence of societal collapse. And Marcus, isolated from any outside information, had believed it. Another entry from 2019 showed Marcus beginning to doubt. "Sometimes I wonder if the world above really did collapse. Director Kellerman won't let me go up to see. Says the radiation levels are still too high, but it's been 4 years. Wouldn't it be safe by now?" I asked him today, and he got angry. Said questioning the program jeopardizes everyone's safety. He reduced my rations for 3 days. I won't ask again. Marcus had been systematically broken down, conditioned to obey, taught that questioning authority meant punishment. By 2021, the diary entries were mostly technical notes, with occasional lines like, "I don't remember what the sun looks like," or "I dream about libraries sometimes, about reading books I choose myself." On March 12, 2023, wildfires broke out in Sevier County, driven by high winds and severe drought conditions. By the evening of March 13th, the fire was threatening rural areas, including Oak Hollow Road. Smoke was visible from the Kellerman property, and evacuation orders were issued for the area. The Kellermans made a critical, fatal mistake. With smoke visible and emergency services ordering evacuation, they packed emergency supplies into their vehicle and drove to a motel in Pigeon Forge, planning to wait out the fire danger. In their haste, or perhaps assuming 7 years of conditioning had broken Marcus completely, they left the hatch mechanism unlocked from the inside. It was the first time in 2,138 days they had made this error. Marcus, alone underground for the first time in years, without the Kellermans present somewhere above, eventually noticed the change. The electronic lock panel on his side of the hatch, which he'd never seen show anything but a red locked indicator, was flashing green. His diary from that day, later recovered, described his thought process. "The panel is green. I've never seen it green. Maybe the power system failed. Maybe they forgot. Maybe this is a test to see if I'll be obedient, even when I have the chance to disobey. But I don't care anymore. If it's a test, I'll fail. And if it's real, I'll finally see the sky again." He climbed the ladder, 40 feet up the concrete shaft, his atrophied muscles screaming in protest. When he pushed against the hatch, it opened. He saw the sun for the first time in 2,138 days. Marcus wandered the 7 miles to Sevierville in a disoriented daze, his mind unable to fully process what was happening. His body remembered things his conscious mind had forgotten: following roads, avoiding traffic, seeking shelter when he felt exposed. He broke into a storage shed along Route 321, finding the oversized clothes he'd worn to the library, needing something less conspicuous than the gray prison outfit the Kellermans had provided. When he reached downtown Sevierville, his body carried him to the library, on instinct, muscle memory from his academic life asserting itself. Libraries meant safety, knowledge, civilization. He was still holding the papers, his final engineering report, the document he believed he needed to submit to FEMA once he reached the surface, to prove his work was complete and he'd fulfilled his duty to the continuity program. The case against Robert and Diane Kellerman proceeded with unprecedented speed. Public outrage demanded justice, and the evidence was overwhelming. They were charged with kidnapping, aggravated assault, false imprisonment, coercion, and conspiracy. The trial began in September 2023 at Sevier County Criminal Court, and media presence was massive. National news outlets called it the Bunker Case, Tennessee's Chamber of Horrors, the survivalist kidnapping. District Attorney Michael Hendricks presented a devastating case built on irrefutable evidence. The premeditation was clear. They'd planned for over a year, attending Marcus's lectures, purchasing supplies, building the bunker before the abduction. Cell tower data and witness testimony placed the Kellerman vehicle in Cataloochee Valley on October 15, 2015. A hiker recalled seeing a gray SUV with 2 people near Palmer Creek that afternoon, something that had seemed unremarkable at the time, but now took on sinister significance. The deception was systematic and sophisticated. The fabricated FEMA documents, fake disaster footage, and psychological manipulation constituted sustained coercion designed to break Marcus's will and make him a compliant worker. Expert testimony from psychologists explained how the Kellermans had created a false reality, exploiting Marcus's isolation and his initial confusion after being kidnapped. They'd weaponized his patriotism, his desire to be useful, his scientific mind that wanted to believe in rational explanations. By convincing him he was part of a government program, they'd transformed a kidnapping victim into a willing participant in his own captivity. Marcus took the stand for 7 hours over 2 days. His testimony was heartbreaking, delivered in a flat, affectless voice that made it somehow worse than if he'd been crying. He described how he'd been hiking alone, following up on cave entrance coordinates, when he'd encountered Diane Kellerman on the trail, apparently injured, calling for help. When he'd approached to assist, Robert had emerged from the brush and used a high-powered stun gun, incapacitating him instantly. He'd woken up underground, disoriented, in pain, with the Kellermans explaining that nuclear war had broken out. The surface was contaminated, and he'd been selected for a government continuity program because of his geological expertise. They'd shown him the forged FEMA documents, played him edited news footage, created an entire false reality. At first I thought I was helping my country, Marcus testified, his voice barely above a whisper. Director Kellerman showed me the credentials, the paperwork, the footage of destroyed cities. He said I'd been selected because of my geology expertise, that my knowledge of underground systems was critical for rebuilding after the surface became habitable again. I believed him for, I don't know, 2 years? Maybe more. It felt real. They were so detailed in their lies, so consistent. By the time I realized it might not be true, I couldn't escape. I was 40 feet underground. I tried once, early on, maybe in 2016. I tried to climb out when they weren't paying attention. Robert caught me. He turned off the ventilation system for 8 hours. I thought I'd suffocate. The air got so thin. After that, I just worked. I did what they asked. I wanted to survive. I thought, maybe, if I was useful enough, valuable enough, they wouldn't kill me. The courtroom was silent except for muffled sobs from the gallery. Marcus continued, describing 7 years of forced labor, of designing improvements to his own prison, of being shown fake evidence of a world that had ended while he remained trapped below ground. He described the psychological torture of being told his family was dead, that everyone he knew had perished in the nuclear exchange. He described the humiliation of having to ask permission for basic necessities, of having his food withheld as punishment for asking questions. The court-appointed attorneys for the Kellermans faced an impossible task. Their strategy focused on mental health. Diane's defense argued she suffered from shared delusional disorder, influenced by Robert's paranoia about societal collapse. Her attorney painted her as a victim of Robert's manipulation, though evidence of her active participation, her attendance at Marcus's lectures, her role in maintaining the deception, her willingness to reduce his rations as punishment undermined this claim. Robert's defense claimed he genuinely believed societal collapse was imminent and that he was saving Marcus by including him in survival preparations. Psychiatric evaluation revealed paranoid personality disorder and symptoms of delusional thinking. but he was ruled competent to stand trial. His attorney tried to argue diminished capacity, that his paranoid worldview made him unable to understand the criminality of his actions. Neither defendant showed remorse. During the trial, Robert was overheard telling his attorney, "We were right to prepare. The collapse is coming. It's only a matter of time. Marcus was ungrateful. We gave him purpose. We gave him important work. We saved his life." The jury deliberated for 6 hours. The verdict was guilty on all counts. Robert Eugene Kellerman was sentenced to 3 consecutive life sentences without possibility of parole, one for each major charge of kidnapping, aggravated assault, and false imprisonment. He received an additional 25 years for conspiracy and coercion charges. He was designated a violent offender and transferred to River Bend Maximum Security Institution. Diane Patricia Kellerman received 35 years in prison with eligibility for parole after 28 years served. She was transferred to Tennessee Prison for Women. The disparity reflected Diane's cooperation with prosecutors. She'd provided detailed testimony about the abduction, the daily operations of the bunker, and Robert's planning process. While she'd participated, Robert had been the architect and primary enforcer of Marcus's captivity. For Marcus's family, the sentencing brought cold comfort. His mother, Susan Chen, was given the opportunity to address the court during the victim impact phase. Her statement was brief but devastating. "You gave us back our son's body, but the Marcus we knew, the brilliant, joyful young man who loved geology and hiking and wanted to map undiscovered cave systems, that Marcus died in that hole. What came back is a broken version of him. He doesn't laugh. He doesn't dream about the future. He asked permission to use the bathroom in our own home." Robert and Diane Kellerman didn't just steal 7 years. They stole his future, his career, his chance at a normal life. They stole the person he was supposed to become. Marcus Chen's return to society has been anything but the triumphant reunion that news outlets initially portrayed. Post-traumatic stress disorder doesn't begin to capture the depth of his psychological injuries. As of 2024, Marcus lives with his parents in Portland, Oregon. He cannot live independently. His daily life is marked by severe limitations that reveal the lasting damage of prolonged captivity and psychological manipulation. He suffers from severe agoraphobia. Large open spaces trigger panic attacks. He feels exposed without walls nearby, vulnerable in a way he can't articulate. The vastness of the sky frightens him. His circadian rhythm was destroyed by years of artificial lighting. He often sleeps during the day and wakes at night, unable to reset his body's internal clock, despite medication and therapy. Hypervigilance controls his life. Any loud noise, doors closing, footsteps above him, cars backfiring, sends him into panic. He sleeps with earplugs and weighted blankets, needing to feel contained and protected. He wears noise-canceling headphones when leaving the house, which is rare. Complex PTSD manifests in flashbacks that occur daily, sometimes multiple times per day. He sometimes reports to his father for morning briefing, a conditioned behavior from the bunker that he can't break. He'll stand at attention and wait for assignments, his mind temporarily unable to distinguish between past imprisonment and present freedom. Social interaction is nearly impossible. He struggles to maintain eye contact or hold conversations beyond a few sentences. Friends from his university days find him unrecognizable, and most have stopped trying to maintain contact, unable to bridge the gulf between who Marcus was and who he's become. His psychiatrist, Dr. Ellen Morales, explained to media during a press conference about long-term captivity trauma. Marcus experienced prolonged captivity with systematic psychological manipulation over 7.5 years during a critical period of young adult development. His captors didn't just imprison his body. They colonized his mind, creating a false reality that he was forced to accept as truth. Recovery from this level of trauma is measured in decades, not years. Some aspects may never heal. The person he was before the abduction essentially doesn't exist anymore. We're working to help him build a new identity, a new life. But it's extraordinarily difficult when the foundation of his sense of self was systematically destroyed. Perhaps most tragically, Marcus occasionally asks his parents if he can finish the calculations. In his bedroom, papers cover one entire wall engineering diagrams, ventilation formulas, structural drawings for underground bunkers. He can't stop designing them. It's the only work he remembers clearly, the only task that feels familiar and meaningful. When he's stressed or overwhelmed, which is often, he retreats to these papers and calculates load-bearing ratios for hours, sometimes through the entire night. His therapist sees this as both a coping mechanism and a cage. The Kellermans trapped Marcus's brilliant mind in their paranoid worldview, and even now, freed from the physical bunker, his intellect remains imprisoned by their delusion. The work they forced him to do has become his obsession, perhaps because it's the only thing that made sense in those 7 years, the only constant in a world of lies. During the trial, one of Marcus's diary entries from 2019 was read aloud by the prosecution. In it, he'd written, "Sometimes I wonder if the world above really did collapse. Maybe this bunker is all that's left. Maybe Director Kellerman saved me, and I should be grateful instead of angry. But if I'm wrong, if the world is still there, does it even matter anymore? I've forgotten how to be part of it. I don't remember how to talk to people who aren't Director Kellerman or Nurse Diane. I don't remember what music sounds like, or what trees smell like, or what it feels like to make my own choices. Even if I could leave, I don't think I could survive out there anymore. I've become a bunker person. That's all I am now." That passage captures the ultimate cruelty of his captivity. The Kellermans didn't just steal his freedom. They rewrote his reality so thoroughly that he questioned whether there was anything worth returning to. Robert Kellerman remains in maximum security, unrepentant and unchanged. He writes letters to fellow inmates about preparing for the end times, about how society is on the verge of collapse, and he was simply ahead of the curve. He's been denied appeal twice, with judges noting that his complete lack of remorse and continued delusional thinking make him an ongoing danger to society. Diane Kellerman reportedly experiences severe depression and remorse in prison. She's participated in therapy and written a letter of apology to Marcus, which was forwarded to his parents. Marcus has not read it and has stated through his attorney that he has no interest in communication from either of his captors. His mother, Susan, read the letter and later told reporters it was self-pitying and focused more on Diane's suffering in prison than on what she'd done to Marcus. Marcus continues intensive therapy, including EMDR for trauma processing, cognitive behavioral therapy, and medication for anxiety and depression. Small victories are celebrated by his treatment team. He recently attended a family dinner at a restaurant, his first time in a public dining space beyond medical appointments. He lasted 12 minutes before needing to leave. but it was 12 minutes more than he'd managed before. He's begun taking short walks around his parents' neighborhood, always with his father present, always wearing his noise-canceling headphones. He started reading again, mostly geology textbooks from his undergraduate years, trying to reconnect with the passion he once felt for the earth sciences. The bunker at 237 Oak Hollow Road was filled with concrete by the new property owners in December 2023. The process took 3 days and required several cement trucks to pump enough concrete to completely fill the shaft and chamber. The house was demolished shortly after, torn down to the foundation. The land remains unsold as of 2024. Real estate agents report that the property's history makes it essentially unmarketable. No one wants to live where such horror occurred, where a brilliant young man spent 7 years buried alive, forced to engineer his own prison while being fed an elaborate lie about the world ending above him. The case of Marcus Chen forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth about the nature of evil and the people who commit extraordinary crimes. The monsters we fear are rarely the strangers lurking in dark alleys. They're the quiet neighbors, the ones who pay their taxes on time, who wave politely at the mailman, who volunteer at community events and seem perfectly ordinary. Robert and Diane Kellerman spent years hiding in plain sight, constructing their underground prison, while the world above remained oblivious. They attended town meetings, shopped at local stores, lived what appeared to be a normal rural life, while beneath their property, 40 feet down, a young man slowly lost his mind in a concrete box. They weaponized their own paranoia about societal collapse and Marcus's initial confusion and terror after being kidnapped, to sustain a crime of staggering cruelty that lasted over 7 years. They showed that with enough planning, enough psychological manipulation, enough willingness to lie consistently and elaborately, you can make someone believe almost anything. You can make a brilliant geology student believe he's serving his country when he's actually a slave. You can make someone grateful for captivity by convincing them the alternative is death. You can steal not just someone's freedom, but their sense of reality itself. And in the end, the most terrifying aspect of the Appalachian silence isn't the bunker itself, though that underground prison is nightmare enough. It's what the bunker represents. A prison built, not primarily with concrete and steel, but with lies. A captivity that convinced the captive he was being saved rather than destroyed. The physical bars of a traditional prison at least have the honesty of being visible. You know you're imprisoned. But the Kellermans built a prison of false reality, and that kind of prison can persist even after the physical walls are gone. Marcus Chen escaped the physical darkness 40 feet below ground on March 12, 2023, when he climbed that ladder and pushed open the hatch. But whether he'll ever escape the psychological darkness, whether he'll ever fully return to the world and reclaim the future that was stolen from him, remains an open question that may never have a satisfying answer. This is Silent Crime Case, reminding you that sometimes the most profound crimes happen in silence, far from sight, in places where the only witnesses are those who've had their voices systematically stolen. If this case affected you, or if you have information about unsolved disappearances in your area, contact the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System at 1-855-626-0000 7600. Every missing person deserves to be found, and every family deserves answers, even when those answers reveal horrors we can barely comprehend. Subscribe for more investigations into the cases that haunt us, the mysteries that demand answers, and the survivors who show us that the human spirit, though it can be broken and bent nearly beyond recognition, sometimes finds a way to endure. We'll see you in the next investigation.